Mute automatically.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
More that you can lean into your own personal discomfort, say what needs to be said in a non-offensive way, the more you make the world a better place.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to this highly anticipated discussion with my new friend, the great Dr. Martina Pesic from Hamburg. And before I hand her the microphone and she enraptures everyone with her command of this topic, I'll just say a couple of things, if I may. It's great to have you here, Doctor.
Thank you.
I thought it would be interesting to see what AI had to say about you. And I absolutely loved what I read. Dr. Martina Pesic is a prominent negotiation expert and expert advisor and keynote speaker based in Hamburg, Germany. She's the CEO and founder of MP Consult, an advisory firm specializing in high-stakes negotiation management and value-based sales. Dr. Pesic has over 17 years of experience advising executives and leadership teams on complex deals, including multi-billion-dollar M&A, merger and acquisition, strategic procurement, and sales projects. She's widely recognized for her psychological approach to business, having written her doctoral thesis on emotions in negotiations. You're currently a lecturer, a LinkedIn top voice, an author and speaker, and an instructor for the negotiation module at Strive magazine. Your specialties include ghost negotiating, which is the handling of sensitive mandates directly on behalf of clients, value selling, and your, let's say, growing visibility in applying these principles to the crisis and conflict space. You have a LinkedIn page that's very, very active, and you also have a website, which we can give people the links to at some point during our discussion. Thank you so much for joining us, Martina. It's been great to get to know you, and I would just say that before I turn it over, what drew me to attention to you was the very short piece that you chose to do with our mutual and dear friend Gary Nesner on what's more important, confidence or tools. And it's unusual for someone from the business space in negotiations to be clearly such a visible student in how all of this works, willing to reach across disciplines, find other experts, collaborate, and identify what's shared. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Good. Martina, you know, everybody has an origin story. Like when you watch the superhero movies today, there's a story that underpins how they were, how they developed or what drew them to their superhero role. And, you know, Gary speaks about his installing for time in his book, you know, from being a school-age boy, finding himself in situations where he was negotiating with people who were aversive with one another. I certainly have an origin story. What was it in the course of your young life that captured your interest about negotiation, communication, and wanting to explore that as an expression of your identity?
Well, I was always interested in negotiations already as a very small kid, even not knowing the term of negotiation, just acting on it. And like already in school, I was always dealing with something. So either with sweets or later with some nice earrings or some nice jewelry. I was always like trying to make business and trying to sell value before the item or before the product. And that was super interesting. I just remember an episode when I was 8 years old, and my mother was actually had a flower shop, and she had the supplier from Holland and who had super nice shells. And well, she said, we will be for 4 weeks in Croatia, and after that, the summer's gone, so I don't need anything for decorations, even if you like give it to me for free. And I just told her, Mom, can you buy it for me, because I have there an idea. And what I started was I was selling those shells to tourists. And I was not interested in money. I was interested in the process of convincing them that my product is superior, that they really have the connection with the shell. And then I told her, for example, do you hear the sea in it? And how does it make you feel? And getting the other person to emerge in the emotional sphere, it was super nice. And actually, it was the best way to optimize the price and to really make people on the same time happy. Even though this sounds paradox, you can have a very high price and make people happy because you offer them something different than just a transactional value. And that I learned already from a very small age on. And then I combined that later with my tutoring. I was a tutor at school, and I always already had them. And you would know that, of course, Andy. As negotiation experts, we always, for us, it's very important to have ambitious goals, not just any goals, but ambitious goals. So
Yeah.
I set myself goals that every student will improve 2 grades within 6 months, and I really succeeded with that, and I really loved that. And it was not by going the standard way, it was by a very, very individual approach. And I think this is the basic of my work. I love to really dive deep into the problems, into the challenges of people, and find their way of doing the things so that they can be successful in their own way.
I love your description of that, and I think that at least in the area in which I operate, which is crisis negotiations in some specific sectors like psychiatric healthcare, corrections, youth and family services, and let's say a lot of involuntary settings. The training for crisis communication is generally not associated with really what would be engendering relationship, selling value, and the value we're selling is the engagement of behavior that's more constructive than whatever you're doing now. So, someone could be engaged in very destructive or violent behavior, and we are essentially selling a different outcome than the one that they're on their way to. So you're selling in a very violent place, and there's challenges that we have to work through in that context that are no different than the challenges that you work through either in the boardroom or when you were in school and trying to impart value when selling the earrings or the flowers. So I absolutely love the things that bring us together because we still need confidence. We still need tools. Our contexts, our settings are just different, but our approach is very, very similar. And, one thing that stood out in so you have this developmental prototypical experience of selling value. And then you went to school. When you went to school, particularly your graduate education, why didn't you wind up as a clinical psychologist or an experimental psychologist or a industrial psychologist? What drew you to a thesis that regarded emotions and negotiation? I mean, that seems so superhero specific to Martina, So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, I was always a deal maker, so that's in my core. I love to see the results and to really come to measurable results. So that's something that drives me. And so I was always yeah, working in deal making, engaging in deal making. So this is my base. And the funny thing, what I realized, not they're not all deals are done, even though they would be financially or strategically good deals. And I wondered, why don't they do that? It's just not logic. Why don't they succeed to close this deal? And very often what I realized, it's not about the financials, it's not about the attractivity of the deal. It would actually make sense. And the company would be better off, or even the people would be better off. But something happened during the negotiations, something's very often intangible, and people just go off even though this deal would be great. So I started to analyze what might be those factors. And at first I thought, okay, engaging in very international negotiations, I thought, okay, maybe there's intercultural problems. So I got Daimler to finance my diploma thesis on international negotiations with the focus on China. And what I realized there was, of course, intercultural issues or misunderstandings might be an issue in negotiations and might lead to a backlog or to a standstill in negotiations. But people tend to forgive more intercultural differences or mistakes than emotional ones. So when there is face loss in a negotiation, that's really something that's not forgiven. When you overstep interculturally, they say, well, he's not trained, maybe he does not know, maybe it's not intentional. But the interesting thing is, one thing all people everywhere in the world have in the same manner is emotions. We all have the same basic emotions.
Yes.
We all feel the same, even if you're an indigenous people, or if you're, I don't know, live in Hamburg or in USA or anywhere in the world, you have the same emotional needs and you have the same feeling of face loss, and this just doesn't feel good. And when you're in this phase, when you're very emotional, and I love what Gary does, maybe you saw him once, he always takes the balance and he say, well, even emotionality is high, rationality is low. So you have to bring them in balance and you have to bring emotionality down so that rationality can take over again. And I really love this picture because that's the truth. When you're emotional, when you're in a face loss zone, you don't care anymore if this deal is good or not. You just care about sticking it to the other person and making the other person suffer because it was very, very, you feel that it's very, very bad what the other person did just to you.
So it was through this research of international negotiations that you became very captivated by this topic of the difference between, let's say, cultural matters and matters of emotion, where there, and by the way, today, particularly in the West, there is a lot of training about cultural competence and cultural sensitivity, and I would say less formalized training on self-regulation. I have a friend who he's a researcher, but he's also an attorney, and he's very interested in creating data dashboards for police agencies across the nation to collect and track data. And he created a data set of 16,000 use of force incidents that had been determined to be inappropriate by their relative agency wherever they were anchored. And he analyzed like over 150 markers within each of these incidents where there was a use of force between a police officer and a person in community, and there was a determination that the use of force was inappropriate, and he researched every one of these occurrences. The marker that was present in every single episode was the emotional dysregulation of the officer. Every single bad use of force had within it emotional dysregulation of the officer that he derived from the narrative content of the case. So it shouldn't be surprising that when we become dysregulated in our emotional state, our ability to engage in complex thinking and even connection with another human being is very, very diminished. And it takes someone skilled to support someone who is dysregulated to come back to regulation. And in your AI bio, one of the things it also noted is that not only are you an educator and instructor, but you are today engaged in negotiations on behalf of companies, negotiations on behalf of stakeholders. I love the fact that people in the space also stay involved, as I do, in terms of um, the public safety presence in the negotiation space. I'm frequently involved in supporting people who live with homelessness, serious mental illness, and substance use, even today. Uh, I need to stay plugged into that. That's what you do. So when you compare when you got your education to now, and you witness people engaging in negotiations, where are you seeing the greatest needs for expertise?
The general problem we have is that unfortunately negotiation is not a topic in school, and almost never in university. Well, I'm doing something to change that,
Yes,
but I
yes.
and you also at all in universities. But I think this is such an important interpersonal skill, maybe the most important that there is, because not only does it help you to get more of what you want, it also helps the other party. Like my most of the time, and I'm sure that this might be also your job in a different sphere. Most of the time, my job is to help the other party to better understand why they are reacting and what their trigger points are, and what is really important to them. Because the one thing is the position. It's always easy to take a position, something that's touchable, something that you can see, that's easy to point. But that's like an iceberg. It's just the tip of the iceberg. The real things that are working in yourself and that are provoking those emotional reactions and leading to conflict with the other party, they lie much, much deeper. And so our job is to help the other person find out what their needs really is. And when we are able to go beyond positions and to find a solution based on interests, also fears and wishes, and all those things that are below the tip of the iceberg, then actually we can create something bigger than all the puzzle parts alone. And this is something great. We can make situations, we can make solutions greater than without the skill. So I can better understand I can also, sometimes I have to ask myself, okay, is this a position or is it a real interest? And are there maybe other ways to come to the same conclusion, to the same solution that might be helpful for the other party to better engage? So, our job, and the skill is so important to find bridges in areas where you think there's no way that those people can work together, but there is always a bridge. And this is really something that's very deeply ingrained in myself. I'm convinced that there is always a way of solution, of a peaceful solution, of a way to improve the relationship. Even the topic is tough. Sometimes the tougher the topic, the better and more and deeper the relationship is in the end. This sounds paradox, but I'm sure you know what I mean by that.
Yeah, I want to tease that idea out a little bit. But first, Martina, before I do, whether it's your arm or your hands, when they move on the desk, the noise is very loud. So I just want to make you aware of that. What you just described is something that I don't think anybody is talking about, and that is that you approach the negotiation with the belief, the unwavering belief that a bridge can be found. And I don't think enough people, certainly in the crisis negotiation space in workforces across the country, I think when they encounter or observe difficulty, very often they retract because they believe a bridge can't be found. A way to better understand one another is not available, and because it's difficult, they recoil from the event. And you just talked about something that I think we need to talk about more. You have arrived at the conclusion, Dr. Martina Pesic, that there is a way. It's just a matter of taking the necessary time to find it, and we're going to find it, and things are going to improve. In other words, you're approaching it with positivity, unswerving belief, and you can't have that belief without the ability to manage your own emotional state, because it can be very arousing when you're feeling despair, doubt, um, potentially shame. I don't. This is bigger than me. I can't figure this out. And where that belief goes out the window if you're not managing those things, fear. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how students are receiving this kind of coaching from you, and what kind of experiences are you providing them where they can develop belief?
Mhm. Well, in my experience, it is first important to understand the trigger we all have in ourselves. So, what does make me emotional? What are my beliefs? What are my values? Because the most interesting thing, or I would say one of the biggest reasons for conflict, is the clash of different values. No, when I, for example, I have a perception, or I have a picture of fairness. No, I have an understanding of fairness, or maybe fairness is a very high value. The problem with fairness, it is subjective. So what is fairness? What is fairness to me doesn't mean that there's the same perception
Right.
on the other side. And when I have another person with another personality for whom fairness is not a high value, and he, I don't know, behaves in a way that is very irritating to me, because I perceive he's not fair, she's not fair, why is she behaving that way, or she does that on purpose. This does not this is really where I limit myself. And what I always say is the best way to protect yourself is to go into a negotiation without any expectations. If I don't expect a certain behavior, I can't be disappointed, because actually disappointment is one of the biggest trigger for conflict in negotiation.
Oh my gosh, I love that you said that. Gary has supported so many people who are hard on themselves about their performance, and as a result it affects their performance. And
Yeah.
I so appreciate that about him. And you're saying something very, very similar. It almost sounds very Jiddu Krishnamurti, who was a great thinker some decades ago from the theosophy domain. Um, it almost sounds very Buddhist, going into a negotiation uh, detached from the expectations. I think that's very hard to do in today's culture. And I would imagine you're confronted with people who want to learn these skills because they want to reach their goals, and they want their expectations realized. I want to gain or acquire. I want to move from point A to point B. In other words, it people go into negotiations obviously with expectations, and then we're asking them to detach from them.
Well, I think there's a difference between expectation, I would say expectation on behavior, and
Yes.
the goals, the ambitious goals that you set yourself, and that of course you want to gain. You want to gain the deal. You want to you want to achieve your goals. This is legitimate. That is okay. And the interesting thing between those two are, of maybe what might be a nice perspective. What I always say is, negotiation is not about getting or being right. It's about achieving a goal. Because what happens when you go into a negotiation with expectations, then you are disappointed, then you try to explain the other party what is fair and why the other party is not behaving in a fair way. You're not discussing anymore the topics, the content of the negotiation that would lead to a goal. You're negotiating about who's right and who's wrong. And so I always say in that situations, okay, what is more important to you, being right or reaching your goal? And I think this is also something, it's not, we won't be able to change a person. What we can do as coaches is to give them some food for thought and to make them, to take them on the journey of reflection. You just have, for example, those two things. When you enter a negotiation, please don't expect any behavior that you would want to see, because go into the negotiation expecting not to see it actually. So that's the best protection you can do. And then when you have the feeling that the pressure is higher, that things are going emotional, and this is very often the point where you want to prove your point, where you want to be right. I always say, okay, always go to one level higher, to a metasphere, and think, okay, am I still working on my goal, or am I trying to prove a point and to convince the other party? You will not convince the other party. Forget about convincing the other party. You can win the other party over, but you will never convince the other party by explaining the other party that she's not right.
And isn't that something that we always see is people approaching negotiation as if the way they articulate what they think and they believe is going to be something that someone finds insightful, and as a result, they'll abandon their own logic. Um, I'm so glad that the principles of listening are as old as humankind, and that we can find them even in old prayers like Saint Augustine, that I would understand rather than be understood. And what's funny is that when I engage the world and have difficulty, I'm desperately trying to be understood. So I will do things to try to force that to happen, where instead, if I just shut up, listened, and tried to understand what's going on around me, I might derive more information to understand why I'm having difficulty. Our first thing is to point to the external world as our source of difficulty, instead of first managing our own emotional state, and then after that, we'll have the dignity of potentially engaging the world. I think that many people can confuse crisis negotiation with problem solving. Well, if I fix this thing in the internal world, you'll be okay, right? And you'll put the rifle down, or you'll put the table leg down. And, we don't have the ability to fix everything in the world in order for the person to de-escalate. But the person who needs de-escalation has drawn the conclusion that that thing in the external world has to change. That's why I'm animating myself this way. And we have a different agenda as negotiators. We have to help them with their emotional state so that they can engage their wide diversity of thought, their neocortex, their logic, their reason, and then they can put the rifle down, put the bat down, whatever the case is. And that takes always longer to do than an attempt to control them. That always takes longer to have someone arrive at the dignity of their own insight. And it sounds like your interest in what you describe as triggers, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that more, and your talk about individualized approach. That is a principle in psychiatric care and services that's very, very important, because people are different, And if we're not individualizing services, we have problems. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, is there a particular approach that you like from a school of psychological thought regarding triggers and how you tailor your individual coaching to the human being?
Mhm. Well, first of all, it is important to understand that people are not, like when someone is in an emotional state, what's very helpful is to explain what happens to people so that they can better understand and therefore reflect upon it. Because what people think is he's doing that on purpose. He's reacting that way. He wants to be angry and he wants to scream at me. He's doing that on purpose. But it is actually, the point is, when you're in a very aroused, very emotional state, you're in a, so to speak, refractory phase. And when you're in that phase, it's like a tunnel. It's like a tunnel. And
Yes.
the funny thing is, when you're in this tunnel, you filter everything just fitting this emotional state you are in. So when I'm angry, you can say, wow, Martina, look, the sun is shining, how beautiful the weather is. And I say, well, do you want my skin to be burned as well? What's wrong with you? So, and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine that people will be quite irritated because I'm a sun lover. But when I'm very angry, and I'm in a refractory phase, and this can take some seconds. Sometimes when it's very, very rough, it can even take some minutes. You're not able to process in a logic way. It's just not able. And the good thing, and what helps me is to know the person is not doing it on purpose. It's psychology. It's just a state where the person is in, and I have to help the person come out of that state.
Oh,
And
I love that you're calling it refractory, because I had a mentor who introduced me to that word when people are refractory to treatment, and how we need to individualize services so that they are less refractory to treatment. So um, I love the way that you just explained that. We have a lovely question in the comments. What do you mean by you have a feeling for feeling, like you said in a recent LinkedIn post? Maybe you can talk about that a little bit. What's your feeling for feeling, Martina?
what's my feeling for feeling? Well, what I always realize, like sometimes, for example, when there are companies that have videotapes of negotiations with clients. And I don't know how they get this data, but obviously the clients agree to it, otherwise it would not be possible. For me, this is Wonderland, negotiation instruction Wonderland, because I can see step by step what happens. And the funny thing is, you hear the words, you see the micro mimics, and that's what I mean by feeling for feeling. I see what happened. I hear what the person says, but I see what the person really says. So in between lines, and this is so much louder. Sometimes persons are really screaming, and the other party is not hearing it. And that's the tragedy. And that's what I mean. I have a feeling for feeling. So I see those situations. I read between the lines, and I know exactly. Even though the person tells me something completely different, I know that, no, that's not true. And the important thing is, it's not true because the person is lying. Sometimes it's not true because the person doesn't know what is really triggering the person and why this person is in this state and what is really important to it. And that's about micro micro mimics that you. Yeah, it's not easy to read them, and it's like, I would say, it's more like a feeling. You see, okay, they have some small changes in the face, or like the structure of the body is different, or he's doing funny noises, or like the feet are somehow like it's a body language. It's a mix of body language. It's a mix of use of words, and the atmosphere in the room, so to speak. So that's why I mean a feeling for feeling.
Yeah. I love that expression. In the healthcare domain, we're very interested in what's known as a functional behavioral assessment. We're always looking at the function of crisis behavior in a psychiatric setting. Um, why will someone start pounding on the glass of the nurse's station window? Why will someone engage in self-harm with some kind of superficial cutting with a plastic or a sharp of some type? Why will someone, need a weighted blanket to feel safe? And you're describing that differently. You're describing that you're interested in what is animating the behavior without getting wrapped up in what the behavior is. Your curiosity is what's animating that behavior and what's the need that they're trying to meet by it. It sounds like you have a natural gift for that. And when you see the presentation of it, for you, Martina, it sounds like you very naturally feel like that's an invitation, whereas other people might not experience that as an invitation, but they would experience that as messaging to stay away from somebody or something similar. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the way that you help business people that either come to university or come to your private seminars. How do you introduce them to some of these ideas that allow them to be more curious? Do you put them in experiences with one another? Are there like drills or exercises that you use to raise awareness about some of these principles? What's the Dr. Martina approach?
Well, I love to put my participants in difficult situations because we're in a learning atmosphere. I mean, 80-90% of situations they can handle for themselves. They don't need me for those situations. And I just love to put them in really like situations where the pulse is high, where emotionality gets high, where the stakes are high. So what do? For example, you get an ultimatum. What do? How do you react? So, and what I really love is the dynamics in the room. So what I really love to do is in the beginning, having every participant to deep dive into the most challenging situation he or she ever endeavored, and to really tell me what happened and why this felt bad. And then I go in, I explain why the person is in this situation. I show what happened, why the dynamics are happening, and I also explain how you can come out, and maybe also what the difference is between my approach and maybe others is. And I think we are in the same way, you and Gary and I think we are quite similar in that way, is that we always try to win the person over, to find a way where we can set our ambitious goals and we can reach ambitious goals, but still in harmony with the other person. So
harmony, yes, I couldn't agree more. And it sounds like you ask someone, so part of your approach is to get someone to reveal something that really happened that was challenging, or maybe where they know retrospectively now that they could have done better, or they know what went wrong. And it sounds like you use that to create a learning experience for them.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of measures, let's say, what indicators are you looking for? In other words, when someone gives you an experience and they tell you something that causes them some emotional arousal, what it sounds like you tailor how progress will be made in the learning experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, it's very like the best way to get people engaged is when you really deep dive into their biggest challenges. So when we really deep dive into the challenges, they are in a negotiation situation. Remembering those emotions, when you deep dive into very strong emotions, the learning impact is very high because you you remember better because you're
Yes.
aroused. You're like super. How do you say? You're super.
There's research about that, Martina. It's awkwardness. High awkwardness equals high learning. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. When you're super much engaged and you're in a like you feel the situation, it was really bad, and that's the reason why you never want to negotiate again, or why you love negotiations, but sometimes it's just so painful, and then then those are the moments where you can't sleep at night after that, and for days, and you're really like concerned and stressed out. And when you start, like I start my trainings with that, so we deep dive into every single participant, and then we break something, we find a solution, he or she finds a way. Okay, well, I didn't know. Okay, but that's interesting. I never thought about that. Oh, there is a way to solve this conflict without punching the other person. Wow,
Right.
great.
Right.
And then when you see it, you immediately you create this. Okay, negotiation and harmony is not a contradiction. It can go hand in hand, and there is solutions where you can reach an ambitious goal, help the other person to also reach a very ambitious goal, and still be happy. That's maybe that sounds like a paradox, but it is a negotiation. It is a negotiation approach, and it's not the easiest thing. It's not like, okay, well, let's go and take the orange and put it into two halves, because then you have a bad compromise, in my opinion, because you didn't improve anything. You just have an easy way out. It's a solution, but it just doesn't feel. And when you come to the juicy part of it, you have this nice juice, and I feel like this nice cake in the end. That's where the fantasy is. That's where
I love that you're talking about the harmony. That's a great word that is used to describe what Gary would probably refer to now. He's rendering comments. I'm going to read them to you, Martina. Gary's blowing us up. But Gary refers to the top of the stairway now as cooperation, and I couldn't agree more. Some comments from our dear friend and mentor and colleague. Care should be taken to avoid assumptions about someone's needs based solely on body language or even emotional expression. Multiple factors need to be considered, and sometimes errors are made. Thank you, Sifu. That I couldn't agree more. I've painted myself into a corner by mistakes plenty of times, and he goes on to say, open-ended questions and emotional labeling, of course, key ingredients toward better understanding. So, in the boardroom context, Martina, how do you frame emotional labeling and open-ended questions in your learning environment? Do you give students an opportunity to explore what those look like for them? Are you animating some people in oppositional roles so that someone can lean into development of the skill? What's the Dr. Martina approach?
Yeah, well, first of all, as you said, the most important skill is active listening. And we know everybody would say, yes, of course, listening, that's clear. I listen to the other party, that's clear. But the problem we have, the challenge is to really reflect upon our listening skills. Are we really listening to understand, or are we listening to answer? And that's something completely different. So first you have to listen to understand. So shut up. Don't try to give an answer right away. That's one important, not you, but generally.
Yeah.
It's important. And then, for example, to give you an example, let's be more concrete. I just say, for example, you have a client, he says 10% or I'm out. How do you react? What do you tell him?
Okay, talk about that. That's great. Yeah, let's hear it.
Make it more tangible. So 10% or I'm out. Then I have this approach. I would say, okay, you should first, this is shocking. You should first take time to reflect and to compose yourself. So you have to gain time. So the first thing is to say, difficult. And then you count on 3. Maybe you take something, you take notes and do something like people, especially salespeople who can't just shut up. So I always tell them, okay, take something, write something down, look at your colleague, be, shocked, do something. And then the next step is you do something that the other party is not expecting at all. You show the other party to give the other party the highest form of appreciation by thanking the other party.
Wow.
Wow. So let me do that. Difficult.
Thank you for the ultimatum.
Now there's this mistake. Yeah, I know that you're doing it on purpose, but I love it because now we're in a training situation. Let's imagine this is a participant. What happens is, so I understood I need to paraphrase because active listening is also paraphrasing. Yes, and how would you do that? Well, I just tell him, if I understood you correctly, if I don't give you 10%, you're out. Am I right? Yeah. And then what I say is, it's like a hammer. You just hammered the needle even more deeper into the table. And now it's even more difficult to get the 10% from the table. So I say paraphrasing is super thing. So you thank you. First, you thank the other party. You thank for the openness. You thank the other party clearing points out for stating what is important. So thank you. Thank you, Andy, that you're telling me what is important to you. I think this is a good way for us to improve our understanding and to come to a common goal. If I understand you correctly, an adaptation of the offer is important to you. Would it be an idea to prolong our deal to 2 years, or to increase it by 30%, or to add product B to our contract? So you end by staying flexible. So you use the conjunctive, you put another idea in, and you combine it with a very concrete demand of yourself. And so the funny thing,
I love that, Martina. Okay, yeah.
In the process, there are many things that happens. You show highest form of appreciation, so you lower the emotions down because, okay, he's thanking me. Oh, that's nice. I didn't expect that. Okay, where does it come from? So I can't be aggressive anymore because the person is nice to me. So that doesn't fit.
I agree. I've witnessed that happen. Gary Gary, thank you for being here. He's validating your comments on active listening, and his example, just like you said, Martina. Thanks for helping me better understand your perspective.
Yeah,
so your perspective is that if 10% is very important to you, and
yes, yeah. I would. Okay, I didn't elaborate on that. Sorry, we're just in the process. So thank you for making me better understand what is important to you. If I understood you correctly, and now the point is, I always combine in those very difficult, aggressive, threatening situations, I combine paraphrasing with minimizing. So I'm minimizing the threat. I'm not repeating it. That's very important. I'm not saying 10% or you're out.
Right.
Did I understand you correctly? I say, well, if I understood you correctly, an adaptation of the offer would be important to you. Adaptation of the offer.
Yeah, that's very diffuse. That's a lot of possibility there. Yeah.
Can be even like I'm doubling it, I'm getting more.
Yeah.
That might be in the end. So you're opening the options. And that's the most important thing in a conflict situations, in a high stakes, difficult situations where the other party is almost like threatening to go out of the door. Why is the situation threatening? The situation is threatening because there's no flexibility anymore. So you have to make sure to get the other party on the path of flexibility again. So that's
I love that you just said that.
Have as a negotiation expert.
Get them on the path of flexibility again. There was a recent clip I just shared on social media. I'll try to paraphrase it. It sounds like you'd like a solution that helps to increase future sales. Gary's so good with these. There was a clip I shared recently on social media of Jiddu Krishnamurti actually saying, "What is important is my act of listening." In other words, rather than active listening, this is expressed in it's just funny that it's a play on words. It sounds so similar. He said, great. What's important is my act of listening, that I am totally attentive, And
Mhm.
when I am totally attentive, a miracle happens. I become free from all of your statements, true, false, whatever. I'm truly free from all of your statements. And in that freedom, there is no border. The moment I introduce border, I introduce conflict. So when I think about having to move someone toward flexibility, you're experiencing a border, 10%.
Yes, exactly. I
Now
love
the
it.
art
Love
is to redefine what's animating that statement. Sounds like you'd like a solution that will help you increase future sales. Sounds
it.
like you have a perspective that is very clear in its need for 10%. And now you're going to start to artfully move the border from 10% to adaptation,
Mm.
creativity, collaboration, synergy. I think the negotiator is adept at doing that. So that's what I'm hearing you say here. Do I have that right?
Yes, you have that right. And I love your example. It's really, that's what I love about talking to other experts. It's so inspiring and so refreshing. And for me, a good conversation is one where you give and get and broaden your horizon. And I really love that. So actually, thank you for that. It's so nice to talk to you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This has been absolutely lovely. Uh, Martina, maybe you can talk a little bit about your practice. We have an audience that's here in the West. You're 9 hours ahead of us, so thank you for meeting us during your evening time. It's morning here on the West Coast. It's lunchtime for Gary, so he's probably enjoying a sandwich. And if I were with him, I'd be giving him a cigar. But maybe you can talk a little bit about your current practice and how people can find you to learn more. Because one of the strengths that I experience in you is your genuineness and approachability. In other words, you have a gravitas around. I have an interest and willingness to be of value and service to you. How does somebody learn more about Dr. Martina Pesic and take advantage of what you do?
Well, I mean, the best inform or the most informations you can find on LinkedIn actually. As I said, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and I'm writing 2 to 3 posts a week. So, and I'm putting a lot of effort into it. So it's for me, it's very important that they're very insightful. That there's always a punch, always something that you can take and hopefully inspire you. So this might be like a very good address to go if you just want to get inspired, if you want to get new perspectives. And I love the discussions. I have so many nice people commenting and discussing, and I'm really like I love new perspectives, and frequently I also see Gary, and I'm super happy, and then we're engaging, and this is so nice. And this is quite a community, so I'm very happy and proud that I created a nice community on LinkedIn. So there's, I think, 21,000 followers now, and I'm really putting a lot of effort into new articles. And of course, I'm quite often as a keynote speaker. You can hear me as a keynote speaker in like everywhere around the world. So just tune in. Normally, I write about that also on LinkedIn. And yeah, I mean, on LinkedIn, you can also contact me for, I don't know, coaching. Sometimes you have a
Good.
difficult situation, experience, but still you need maybe a new creative idea, coachings, in-house trainings, shadow
Well,
negotiation.
I must tell you that first, your English is beautiful, and but when on so many of your German posts, I have to click the C translation button,
Okay.
and you have a number of video clips that I need the translator to understand the German because I'm you know what I mean? I'm not, I'm a New York knuckle dragger, so I'm not bilingual. But thank God we have technology that allows me to get more Dr. Martina content. We have some final questions, and then Gary's just being funny. Avoid overthinking, as Freud said. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Uh,
I love it.
yeah,
There is
but
just
Johannes has one more question. Another question from Munich, how do you deal or react to blackmail in negotiations? So I'm wondering if Johannes has an experience there that he's needing some help with.
That
Yeah.
would be interesting, actually. Yeah. Blackmail. Fortunately, that's a very rare case, to be honest. Well, that's the elephant in the room. So well, it depends on the situations. Sometimes it's good to really talk about and just say what happens here, And sometimes it's when it's really blackmail. So the other party is somehow threatening you as well. So this is, for me, a very good way to make sure that the other party is not engaging in something that I don't want, is to combine this behavior with something the other party even wants less than what so the pain for the other party is even bigger than for myself. So when you combine those two, so every time the party tries to blackmail me or to threaten me or to talk about something that is making me uncomfortable, I combine it with something that's even more uncomfortable for the other party, and I make it as a sine qua non that when the person is starting to talk about the things I don't want to hear, that the party is hearing a lot of things that the other party even wants to hear less. And this sounds a bit abstract, but it works.
No, it's not abstract. In Karl von Clausewitz, who was a Prussian general in the 19th century, wrote a big treatise known as On War. And he's coined today a number of phrases. One of them is war is politics by other means. And the other idea that he's required reading in many, many military and war colleges. One of his ideas that he made very clear in the 19th century was the proposition we ask of you is less uncomfortable than the proposition we're going to impose on you. So your remark about finding something even less desirable for this person to combine the idea with, the idea here is to immediately set the stage for comparisons that something else is even more at risk or at stake than the thing that you're pushing back on. And I think that's entirely reasonable as a negotiator when we have to describe an undesirable outcome to someone. If they're engaging in blackmail or malevolence, we want them to experience, at least in the conceptual space, if that continues, here is the negative outcome that can befall you. But if you'd like to discontinue blackmailing and want to collaborate, here's a better outcome that we could potentially achieve. And I think that that's among the more complex situations to have to manage, because we don't always know the source of the blackmail or enough information about them to develop a response like that quickly. So we have to deal with all of the discomfort while we're getting targeted with the blackmail. So Johannes, I want to thank you for raising that question. Blackmail stuff. Yes, Gary says it best. Contrast the benefits of cooperation versus the risks of resistance. Thank you again, Master, for distilling my 500 words to 3. Thank you. He does that. I'm going to tell you a funny story. He's here. Let me tell you the story, and then I'm going to give you the final word. So we're doing the video together. Gary, I'm going to tell everybody. We're doing the video together for Icons of Influence. We get through the first day. We go out on the porch. And he said, Andy, I got to give you some feedback. And I don't think you're going to like it, but I need to tell you. I said, Gary, go ahead. He says, Andy, I think you used the word domain a little too much. And I said, God, Gary, I must have said it about 50 times on the first video. So I said, I think you're right. And then it became, I appreciated so much his directness, and he was still gentle, and he was letting me know ahead of time, look, you may not like what I have to say, but it's really important that it gets said. You say the word domain way too much. He actually said, I think you say the word domain a little too much. And Of course, I got this icon here in front of me. I'm like, okay, the word's out. And I did not even use it at all for the next 2 days. But it was so funny that he did that. He's got this gift of reducing my stray voltage thinking in words to something like this. So thank you, Gary. Contrasting the benefits of cooperation versus the risk of resistance.
And the funny thing is that now you talk about Gary. I think I never met a person who was able to de-escalate the situation as quickly as Gary. To be honest, like in seconds, something that was poof, very big, and you thought, "Ooh, this will be very, very, very uncomfortable."
He's very good. He's very good.
Just turn around and okay, there's no problem anymore. And you think about how did he do that? I mean, even as an expert, you ask yourself, what was the magic he was applying?
Yeah.
So beautiful. So I'm absolutely with you.
Dr. Martina, so LinkedIn, you have a website. What is your website?
Well, it's under construction, but it's dr-pesic.com. So dr-pesic.com. But best to go to LinkedIn, and then there's the update as soon as it is online. And because the funny thing is, even the page that is offline is so highly ranked that people can enter it, and I'm getting bookings on it. That's so strange. I can't understand that. Yeah, really. But maybe this is my head. I'm quite a perfectionist. So.
Okay, so people can connect with you on LinkedIn. They can learn more about your work there.
Instagram as well. Dr.Martina.Pesic. Dr.Martina.Pesic.
Thank you for the correction. I've been saying Pesic. It's Pesic. Please forgive me.
Yeah, but you can. I mean, I'm super. As I said, no expectations is the best thing not to get emotional.
Great. We had some great ideas today, and some lovely questions and lovely support from Gary. Martina, I want to thank you so much for coming into our space and sharing your experience and sharing what you do. And I want to encourage everyone who's watching or listening, either live or the recording later, to absolutely follow up with Dr. Martina on LinkedIn. I look forward to our next conversation with her. Thank you. And thank you, Coach, for being here and supporting this session today. And it's going to be available on YouTube, LinkedIn recording. It's on our Jumpstart Facebook page. And Martina, were you able to stream it on your social media?
I have no idea. I think but I have no idea if it worked or not. I will see it now, and my employees.
Well, feel free to come over to my page and share it on yours if it didn't work. And what a complete delight. Take good care, and we'll do this again in the future. Maybe I'll get Gary to come in, and the three of us will have a little masterclass conversation.
Very, very good. And to listeners, follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to stay in contact. And stay tuned still. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. Take good care, everyone. Thanks for your time and your attention today. Bye, Doctor.
Bye.
More that you can lean into your own personal discomfort, say what needs to be said in a non-offensive way, the more you make the world a better place.